At the Abbey, the Queen seemed animated as she chatted with Carol Middleton and the Duchess of Cornwall. The livery worn by the footmen and coachmen are, wherever possible, antique and original. The newlyweds were given a captain's escort, commanded by William's close friend, Major Nicholas van Kutsen, 12 troopers of the Life Guards, and 12 of the Blues and Royals. What an experience for the newest member of the royal family. More than 150 horses were on duty. 1,000 service men and women lined the route. 5,000 police officers managed the crowds, and despite fears of disruption or disorder, the security operation was later universally praised. And these were the scenes that everyone had waited patiently to see. The pure pageantry of a royal wedding. The second in line to the throne, en route to the palace where, with his new wife, he will one day reign as king. For the coachman, a huge responsibility. Riding the lead was Alan Parry, who's been at the Royal Mews for a decade, and John Nelson, a veteran of royal occasions, who's worked at the Mews for 43 years. The carriage itself, with its crimson satin seats and red leather, was restored just a few years ago. For the Queen, the Scottish state coach was chosen instead of an open-top carriage because of the threat of rain. As they turned in beneath Horse Guard's Arch, a chance to draw breath away from the noise of the crowds. Holding hands, the bride and groom made their way onto the parade itself. And a salute from members of the household cavalry. For Catherine, now Her Royal Highness, a further taste of life to come. For the young bridesmaids and page boys, a day they'll be able to talk about for the rest of their lives. Prince Harry showed them the ropes, encouraging them to wave. For the Queen, a sovereign's escort. The 1st and 2nd divisions were provided by 25 men of the Life Guards, the 3rd and 4th by the Blues and Royals, another full complement of 25 officers. And the field officer of the escort for the Queen, Lieutenant Colonel Dan Hughes. A scene redolent of centuries of history. The household cavalry have been involved in such grand royal occasions for 350 years. A sea of red as the lifeguards signalled the approach of the bridal carriage on the last leg of the journey. As the newlyweds passed by the Victoria Memorial, a reminder of just how many people were watching. The banks of television studios and hundreds of cameras from worldwide media clearly visible. On the forecourt of Buckingham Palace, the Guard of Honour, made up by the Welsh Guards, was waiting. More than 100 men. And the band of the 1st Battalion, the Welsh Guards. And so their carriage rolled through the gates of the palace that will one day be their home. On the carriage ride, Catherine had asked her husband whether he was happy now. He had left her in no doubt that the answer was yes. The service, he had said, had been beautiful. And he told her how proud he was that she was now his wife. In the central courtyard, with a helping hand from her husband, the Duchess climbed carefully out of her carriage. They were welcomed, and no doubt congratulated, by the master of the Queen's household, Air Vice Marshal David Walker. And so into the palace to prepare for the official photographs and the first of 2 receptions. For the crowds outside, there was still a grand procession to watch and enjoy. As the Queen and Duke arrived home, she was heard to say the whole spectacle had been amazing. And for someone who normally keeps her emotions very private, that was a measure of how special the day had so far been. for Mr. and Mrs. Middleton, the grandest ride to Buckingham Palace they will ever experience, as they travelled in the Australian state coach with Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall. Next came one of the great set pieces of any royal wedding: the appearance of the newlyweds and the rest of the royal family on the palace balcony. But before that could happen, everything and everyone had to be in place. The pomp and circumstance of a royal wedding is steeped in hundreds of years of tradition. And what a spectacle for the crowds. Martin Brunt, Sky News crime correspondent, was watching.
For the capital's police, keeping the peace around the royal wedding was one of the biggest challenges they had faced for many years. Security, crowd control and safety. They were all issues full of potential difficulties that could have spoiled the big day. There were 1 million people on the street and a global live TV audience of 2 billion. The Metropolitan Police could not afford to get it wrong. From its nearby headquarters at New Scotland Yard, the force had been planning its operation for many weeks. In the end, 5,000 police officers, joined by military personnel, ensured that the pomp and ceremony went uninterrupted. Perhaps the biggest challenge came after the service, moving thousands of revellers towards Buckingham Palace. Nobody wanted to miss the royal balcony appearance.
In a well-rehearsed and highly disciplined operation, hundreds of police formed a human chain to shepherd tens of thousands of well-wishers as close to the palace as possible.
For those who couldn't get close to the route of the wedding procession, giant screens were erected in Hyde Park. They ensured that nobody missed a moment of the celebrations. The police commissioner, Sir Paul Stephenson, had told his officers that morning they should appreciate the honour of being involved. And how they did. They could enjoy their role as the traditional, friendly bobby on the street, an increasingly rare opportunity in the modern world.
Before long, the Mall became a sea of Union flags as the huge crowds moved slowly forward.
At the Victoria Memorial, 500,000 people were marshalled gently into place.
Everyone was hoping they would get right up to the palace gates for the big moment.
The officer in charge of this unprecedented operation said, with some obvious relief, that it had been an amazing success. And who would argue with that? It was a captivated audience. A vast army of Middle England royalists, young and old. There were Londoners, away-day travellers, and overseas visitors.
At 1:25, the curtains behind those famous balcony doors began to twitch. The lucky few who'd made it all the way to the railings primed their cameras. And then, right on cue, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge stepped onto the balcony. "Wow," said Catherine. And William too, though used to great royal occasions such as this, seemed taken aback at the sheer volume of the crowds. Awesome, he seemed to say. The Queen led the rest of the family out. Slowly they all found their place. For Carol and Michael Middleton, this surely must have been the moment when the reality of the extraordinary transition their daughter had now made hit home. Something approaching 1 million people were cheering their girl. She was their princess, their duchess, their future queen. And by rights, Mr. and Mrs. Middleton would now be expected to curtsy to their own daughter. Catherine herself looked supremely happy and thoroughly at home with her new in-laws. She was proving time and again that she's a mature young woman who's entered into a unique lifestyle with her eyes wide open. All of this was fascinating for the crowds, but everyone knew what they were really waiting for: the couple's first public kiss. The roar of approval seemed to stretch all the way back to Admiralty Arch. For one little bridesmaid, though, Grace Van Curtsum, it all seemed a bit much. She put her hands over her ears and scowled. Prince Charles was taking a grandfatherly interest in his wife's little granddaughter, Eliza. William, it seemed, had rather enjoyed the effect his kiss had had on the crowds. He knew they wanted more. One more? He asked his wife. This time he lingered longer. The crowds went into a frenzy. There was one last spectacle, a wedding tribute from the Battle of Britain memorial flight. Over London's skyline thundered a Lancaster, flanked by a Spitfire and a Hurricane, great symbols of British resistance during the war years. And an even deeper roar when they were followed, precisely 30 seconds later, by two state-of-the-art typhoons and two tornadoes, blasting overhead in box formation. It was the Queen who decided it was time for the wedding celebrations to move back into the privacy of the palace. 650 guests were waiting for the reception to get fully underway. The Queen's chefs had prepared 10,000 canapes, and there was plenty of champagne to be enjoyed. As her husband led her back through the palace doors, Catherine couldn't resist one last look over her shoulder. A very special memory of a very special wedding day. For the crowds around the palace and along the wedding route, the party had already lasted many hours. But all over the country, other street parties were just getting going. Thousands were held in towns and villages up and down the land. And of course, this was an extra bank holiday, with Easter creating 2 four-day weekends in a row. The country was in the mood for fun. The parties gave children a special memory to take with them into later life. A memory of the time everyone joined together to mark a new milestone in the history of an ancient monarchy. It had been announced that William and Catherine would be heading back to Clarence House for a rest before the evening celebrations, but no one expected them to make the short journey in quite the style they did. Would it be a Rolls-Royce? Or a Bentley? Or the State Landau again? No. This was going to be a modern end to a traditional wedding celebration. The crowd peered. An engine started. Was that really the future monarch driving his father's old blue convertible? An Aston Martin given to Prince Charles on his 21st birthday? In the passenger seat, Catherine, still wearing the gown in which she had made her vows a few hours earlier, clearly thought it was hilarious. As the car rolled out of the gates of the palace, astonishment quickly turned to cheers. They drove slowly, giving the crowds as close a view as possible. And they both looked delighted when, overhead, a bright yellow Sea King helicopter made a surprise fly past. a wedding tribute to the search and rescue pilot Prince. The number plate bore all the hallmarks of a plan dreamt up by best man Prince Harry, along with the L plate and the balloons.
Jenny, the biggest surprise of the day, must have given the police an extra headache. But despite the security concerns, it was possible for a royal heir and his bride to drive themselves between two palaces. Of course, there were protection officers in a vehicle behind them, but this was a remarkable, fun scene in a country that's had its security problems in the past.
William was enjoying being behind the wheel, motoring sedately down towards Stableyard Road. And then, as quickly as the moment had begun, it ended. The car disappeared through the gates of Clarence House. The Dude and the Duchess, as Prince Harry later dubbed them, were gone. A day that had started with so much expectation from the crowds and the country was almost over. But what a day it had been. From fairy tale dresses to balcony kisses. Trees in the Abbey to balloons on the car. This had been a remarkable royal wedding, and one that neither they nor we will ever forget.
This wedding is going to be huge, and it's what we do best. There's no country in the world that can equal us for pomp and circumstance.
I think there's an enormous amount of interest in this wedding around the world. Prince William is a very eligible bachelor, and people have been waiting for a long time to find out who he's going to get married to.
But it's massive. Look at the press interest ever since that engagement announcement in last year, and the follow-up from that has been quite exceptional. It's going to be, you know, a major event.
I think it's without doubt that William is actually dreading this wedding. He hates pomp and ceremony, he hates flummery, he hates all that sort of thing. And I think he will be thinking now, God, I just want to get this over with, and I want to go back to Anglesey and be a helicopter pilot with his new wife.
She said that she met this really nice boy, and she said, boy. I said, right. I said, what's his name? And she said, Willie.
We were on a trip with some very sick children, and at the end William said to me, you know, Arthur, you must never retire. And I said, William, I'm not going to retire till I take your wedding pictures. He said, you'll have a bit of a wait. Well, it wasn't too long.
After years of waiting, speculation and rumours, Prince William of Wales and Catherine Middleton are to be married. And nobody who watched their smiling faces as they announced their engagement could deny that these were two people who were very much in love.
You know, when I first met Kate, I knew there was something very special about him, and that I knew that there was possibly something that I wanted to explore there. But we ended up being friends for a while, and that just sort of was a good sort of foundation. I'm obviously extremely funny, and she loves that, so it's really good.
This marriage is important to the future of the monarchy because people see William as the new golden boy, and with his beautiful bride, they can carry forward maybe where Charles and Diana left off, or maybe they can do what Charles and Diana never did, which was work as a brilliant team. And you know, the world is really their oyster. They can do so much, and I think that's what the Queen sees in this union, and it's very, very important that it works, and she is putting all her support behind it.
I think the royal family is obviously incredibly fond of Kate. The Queen must have given her discreet seal of approval. Prince Charles was very effusive when they announced their engagement, and Prince Harry gave them the ultimate accolade, saying that Kate was like a sister to him.
So, Britain is set for the biggest royal event since the marriage of Charles and Diana over 30 years ago. But this is going to be a very modern royal marriage, of a new, modern style of royal couple.
I think most would agree that it stands a very, very high chance of success, this marriage, because they know each other so well. That said, they've got more pressure on them than almost any other royal couple before them, because obviously the Queen has had 3 out of her 4 children divorcing, so the pressure on William to make this work is unbelievable.
Over the next hour, we're going behind the scenes of the biggest royal event for 30 years. An exclusive glimpse of the people who make it all happen. From the chefs to the cake makers, and from the florists to the carriages. And, of course, the dress.
Everything, from where people are sitting, to the timing, to the carriages, to the food, the drink, the flowers, everything will be planned to the tiniest detail.
On the day of the wedding, when they're coming back from the church, everything in the kitchen starts to get a bit hectic. Before that, it's quite regimented and organised, but the sooner it gets to the time for the wedding breakfast, that's when the panic buttons start.
It's an amazing feeling to create a royal wedding cake, because it's something different, it's something unique. This is possibly a cake for the future King of England.
They're calling it one of the great love stories of our time. And it all started when William first met Kate at St Andrews University in Scotland, when they were both just 19.
We were friends for over a year first, and it just sort of blossomed from then on. We just spent more time with each other and had a good giggle, had lots of fun, and realised we shared the same interests, and just, you know, had a really good time. She's got a really nice sense of humour, which kind of helps me because I've got a very dead sense of humour. So it was good fun. We had a really good laugh, and then things happened.
It was a slow burning thing. It started off as a friendship. They were in halls together, they had classes together, they had things in common. It then extended to getting to know each other better on the sports field, and then it was the fashion show that allegedly, and I think truthfully, made William view Kate in a totally different way. And I'll never forget it, she walked out in this sort of amazing, sort of slightly see-through negligee, and most people there realised his eyes just sort of followed her around. That was the day that he began to look at her in a different way.
Well, at St Andrews, girls literally threw themselves at William. They really did. And Kate didn't. And of course, you know, all men like to chase. And I think she gave him a bit of a good run. And obviously he started to fall deeply in love with her.
They lived together in Sinnet University. They shared a flat and later a house. They ordered takeaways. They cooked together in the kitchen and burnt the odd saucepan and generally lived like any other student romance.
I think, needless to say, William was very much viewed as a catch by the young ladies at the time. He was also physically looking very good. There were really nice shots of him in sort of camel-coloured jumpers and blue jeans, sort of, you know, slumping on the bonnet of his car outside Highgrove. So he had become a man, and I think the women of the world were aware of that.
Eventually, Prince William popped the question to Catherine while on a romantic holiday at the Liwa Game Reserve in Kenya.
He carried the engagement ring, his mother's engagement ring, which quite frankly is worth a fortune, around in his rucksack for 3 weeks. Thank goodness he didn't lose it.
I think that the fact that William gave Kate his mother's ring was incredibly important because they are the two women that he's obviously loved more than anyone else, and they are sort of united by the ring. And Kate's intelligent enough to know that, you know, it's a sign of great respect that he gave her his mother's ring.
On the day of the photo call, we had a cup of tea with William and Kate, several of us, and he said to me, I'd like you to meet Kate, Arthur, and introduced me to her. And he then went on to, you know, show me the ring that, of course, is Diana's ring, and I said, well, I must take a photograph of that, and that's when he called me and said, Arthur, you come and take a picture of the ring, and I did. And she was so nervous, her hand was shaking, he had to hold her hand steady so I could photograph it.
So the date is set, Friday the 29th of April. The wedding invites have gone out and the venue has been chosen, Westminster Abbey.
The whole point of the Abbey, with Henry III building it, was to build the most magnificent church in the world for these great ceremonies. I think it really was established by the marriage of the Queen and then the Queen's sister, Princess Margaret, her daughter, Princess Anne. And it was really a big break by then with tradition when Prince Charles went to St. Paul's in 1981. Before the ceremony begins, Prince William, his best man, the royal family will all be in place up before the high altar. And then Kate will process up from the West End, through the whole length of the nave, through the choir screen, to join her future husband up on the great steps where their kneelers are going to be placed. And then the ceremony takes place up by the high altar, and then at the end of it, they process back down through the choir, through the nave, to the great clanging chimes of the organ, and in a way to the applause perhaps of people outside the Abbey who've been watching it on great screens.
William has chosen his brother Harry to be his best man at his wedding, while Kate Middleton's sister Philippa will be her maid of honour. Around 2,000 guests have been invited to the wedding ceremony at Westminster Abbey, and a further 600 to the reception at Buckingham Palace.
Well, the wedding is scheduled to start at 11 o'clock, which means it will start at 11 o'clock. And they really dislike the bride being late. I think Diana was 32 seconds late, and it sort of wobbled the arrangements. And after the wedding, William and Kate will drive back in an open carriage to Buckingham Palace, and I think they are then scheduled to be on the balcony for the kiss at about 1 o'clock. And then there will be a reception at the palace, and William and Kate will drive back to Clarence House for a rest before the evening's festivities begin.
This wedding is going to be quite an unusual royal wedding. Kate is the first commoner for 350 years to marry a future king. So there will be a variety of middle-class relatives of the Middletons, as well as the usual array of royals and aristocrats and heads of state.
The ticket to the Abbey is the hottest ticket in town. We know that. And I think the main thrust is going to be William and Kate's friends. I mean, obviously after 9 years together, they've got mostly mutual friends. But William's also said that he wants some representatives of his charity there. Then obviously there'll be the Middleton family and their friends.
I think William's perfect idea of a wedding would be an elopement. I think he would rather go off to Kenya, to Jacka Craig's estate, get married there in privacy with his parents and her parents and a few close friends. I think William would like the wedding to number no more than about 25. However, that ain't gonna happen.
One of the key elements of any wedding are the flowers. Edward Goodyear in London have been providing them to the royal family since the time of Queen Victoria, and are currently florists by royal appointment to both Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. They are creating one of the table arrangements for the wedding reception in Buckingham Palace.
Kate and William, they're obviously very English and very classic. They probably go quite neutral because it's sort of the most modern trend at the moment. And it's very sort of wild and country feel, which we think they'll probably both quite like because they don't like the regalness. They're sort of down-to-earth, modern young couple.
The table centres are extremely important because of the size of the rooms. So they do need some very special arrangements.
We've got about a selection of about 8 different varieties of flowers just to fill it up and give it a bit of variety. But obviously all sort of within the same colour scheme and different shapes and textures to make the arrangement look quite varied.
Her Majesty the Queen is very interested in flowers, and she loves particular flowers, which I can't say really because that's a personal thing, but she definitely loves flowers, and she actually loves arranging her own personal flowers that she's given.
This one I've got here is lilac, which is very popular in spring. That's which will be readily available at the time of their getting married. And you've got the big white hydrangea heads here. They're quite sort of classic and English, and this is the Gilda rose, just to give it a bit of variety and a bit of colour.
The inspiration is that the arrangement is very English and could have come from a very large church in the country. It's got an English feel to it and has English flowers, but it also has the Kentian fern, which of course is where William and Kate were engaged or got engaged.
This is a cream avalanche rose, English grown, and we believe this is what Lady Diana had in her bouquet on her wedding day when she married Charles. Just quite a nice link because we believe obviously William wants her to be part of the day, and we think that they might pick that up with the flowers. We've got these beautiful orchids to drape in, which Diana had in her bouquet. Not traditionally English, but incredibly beautiful and quite modern for a young couple. When this is on the table, it's going to smell absolutely amazing because obviously you've got the roses and the lilac, is going to smell fantastic, but you've also got some sort of organic foliages, so you've got the rosemary and that sort of thing in there, and that's going to smell absolutely beautiful.
When you're dealing with a royal event, there is always the pressure of doing the work absolutely to the top standard. And sometimes, because there are many other staff working on the tables or whatever, that provides some difficulties. But the pressure is really because it's such a special occasion always.
This is obviously a lot bigger arrangement than what the average person would have on their wedding day, mainly because they're royals and it's going to be seen by the world, and it will be replicated a million times over and watched by millions and millions, so a lot of pressure for whoever's doing it.
The wedding dress is for many the main talking point of the day. But what will it look like? And who's making it?
I think when you go on the catwalk, you know, they will probably put like veil and stuff. And
Elizabeth Emanuel made the iconic fairy tale wedding dress for Princess Diana and knows all too well the pressures of the job.
Well, I've got to say, when we heard that we were going to be doing the wedding dress, that's when the pressure started, because we were aware that there was going to be hundreds of millions of people watching, and so although we tried to put that to the back of our minds, you know, it was lucky we had a lot to think about, and we were very, very busy, because otherwise, you know, it would have almost been too much.
Diana was very hands-on in the design and creation of her dress.
Well, we wanted to make the dress very dramatic, and we thought, well, you know, traditionally the wedding dress does have a train, and but let's make it the longest possible. So Diana liked that idea that we would make it longer than any other royal wedding train. So the longest, we'd done a bit of research, I think was 23 feet. So we thought, well, let's add on the extra 2, make it really, really long. But still, looking back at the footage from those years ago, you know, you see her coming out the coach, and that is my favourite shot of all time, when she's coming out of the coach, and she's virtually at the top of the steps of St Paul's, and her train is still in the coach. And I just love that, and I don't think either of us realised the impact. You know, we were thinking in our heads of doing the dress, the train, and visions of it up the aisle, but that bit was my favourite, when she was going up the steps. I loved that.
30 years on, and it will be Catherine Middleton's turn to stun the world in her own wedding dress. But what will it look like?
I think it's very, very possible that Catherine may want to, you know, surprise everybody, because, you know, she's you know, seen being photographed and making statements with what she wears now, and it may be she'll want people to, you know, be surprised. There may be an interesting twist on the design, something unexpected, and especially if there are no rules and regulations, you don't really know what that might be.
I don't think she's going to basically go for the typical meringue, but I think something very, very maybe fitted on the actual waist and fitted onto the hips, but the fullness at the side. Possibly, I think, a full-length veil and a very regal sort of type tiara. I think possibly with a hair down, possibly maybe half up, half down. But I think she's generally going to go for something very classic, nothing too over the top.
I think Kate's gone from a traditional home counties girl in her cowboy boots and jeans and flowery skirts to quite an elegant young woman.